Okay. My philosophical argumentation, the aid of Allah, using ChatGPT, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of Allah, the most compassionate, merciful. Rational arguments for why homosexual relationships are immoral, without it having to depend on whether it harms anyone. The liberal does not usually believe that an act is wrong because of what it is by itself. Instead, he generally believes an act is wrong because it unnecessarily harms someone, or in other words, it unnecessarily causes pain to someone. Likewise, he generally believes that if two consenting adults do not harm anyone, then their act is morally good and should be permitted. But why should we assume that whenever individuals involved in an act consent to it without harming the other, then now the act becomes morally good? In clearer words, why should it be that what makes an act morally good is if consent occurred and no harm happened? What is the liberals' proof that this is how true morality actually is? If we agree that there are real existent truths about how justice/morality actually are, then what is the liberal's proof that his claims about morality actually match with those truths about how morality actually is? For the Muslim, all the truths about how justice/morality is are inside the mind of Allah, the All-Knowing. And since the Quran proves itself to be from an all-knowing, truthful God, then we can trust this divine, rational information about how morality actually is. The liberal has no such proof. So if we both agree that there are real existing truths about how justice actually is, then how does the liberal know what they are? Simply feeling extremely certain and not feeling disgusted/disturbed in one's beliefs is not enough. Because now, if simply one feeling certain and not disgusted or disturbed by one's beliefs about morality was enough to prove that one was correct about how morality is, then we fall into contradictions. Since a racist feels certainty and no disgust or disturbance in his own unique beliefs about morality, so does a jihadi, a Nazi, a communist, a Zionist, and so on. If their mere certainty and lack of disgust or disturbance in their beliefs was enough to prove that what they believe about morality was correct, then all of these contradictory ideas of morality would be true and false at the same time. Example, Islam and liberalism regards racism as morally evil, but racists believe racism is morally good. The racist feels no disgust or disturbance and have certainty in their beliefs. The Muslim and liberals are certain in their own beliefs, but these beliefs contradict each other. And generally, contradictions like this indicate that it cannot be that both are correct and wrong at the same time. It cannot be that racism is both good and bad at the same time. There is no reason to believe in this contradiction unless someone somehow manages to prove that the real existent truths about morality are in fact contradictory, but there is no proof for that. Other things, like attempting to use as a proof the fact that books have been written about one's moral beliefs, suffer from the same issues as trying to use certainty as a proof. For every group ever has written books about their beliefs about morality. So if merely there being a book about one's moral beliefs proved that those beliefs were truly describing how morality actually is, then we fall into contradictions again, since every group has written books on morality, with each book contradicting another book's claims about how morality is. The proof therefore has to be something exclusive, and this goes to what our sources of knowledge are, or what are our sources of knowledge when it comes to knowing how morality really is. A divine rationalistic revelation that actually has proof it's from God would be an exclusive type proof that the vast majority of mankind cannot claim to equally have. But there is also another source of knowledge regarding morality we all could use, that we all sort of have access to. That is our original, naturally arising beliefs about how morality is, which God planted. We all have natural instincts to breathe, eat, drink, and walk. No one regards this as abnormal or immoral because it is natural. Likewise, we have natural beliefs, and our mind is wired in such a way that it naturally generates various beliefs that we usually just take as true unless they are overridden. Take beliefs such as the world existing outside of our mind, and that what we see is really an actual world and not merely a visual hallucination generated from our imagination. We naturally believe that humans naturally believe in a real world. If someone came and said everything is a dream, hallucination, or simulation, the majority of mankind would say such a belief is abnormal, and that the mind does not naturally generate such a belief originally. Other beliefs which are natural include believing other people have minds and emotions and are not walking robots mimicking human behavior devoid of emotions and a mind, or belief in cause and effect, change, motion, that contradictions do not exist, and so on. Now, natural beliefs are generally reliable unless there's a good reason to override them, but many of the times they are overridden for bad reasons. Most people override their natural beliefs for other natural reasons that are no longer reliable. Take, for example, the natural instinct to trust whatever your parents tell you. 99.99% of children ever in any time or age adopt the beliefs of their parents, presuming their parents to be reliable source of information. And although this may be generally the case when it comes to survival and observable realities, when it comes to the topic of morality, they are entirely unreliable. How do we know this? We'll take any child from any age. His parents tell him some beliefs about how morality is. He trusts them because they are his parents, but his reasons for trusting them are identical to every other child who trusts their own parents. And so he has no greater indication that his parents are more reliable than any other set of parents in informing about how morality is, as all children generally observe near identical signs of trustworthiness from parents, using that as their reasoning to trust whatever their parents have to say about morality. The exceptions, of course, are parents who mistreat, manipulate, and constantly lie to their kids. Such kids are more likely to distrust in such matters. Now, once upon a time, parents were a reliable source of information regarding morality. This was mainly at the beginning of Adam's time. There was only one religion, and people conveyed to their children what God conveyed to Adam. So, since God conveyed moral truths to Adam and Adam conveyed it to his descendants, then for a while parents were conveying reliable information about morality. And they also naturally knew many moral truths without being told by anyone, since such parents were not raised by parents with entirely abnormal and unreliable beliefs about how morality is. So their natural beliefs that God planted in them were accessible and hadn't been overridden by earlier parents. But now that has completely changed. There are literally thousands of religions, thousands of moral views today, let alone in history, each forefather contradicting another, each parent contradicting the other. There is no reason to think one is upon their natural original beliefs with regard to morality, or that their parents are with regards to morality, as any reason you give to why you think you are or your parent is upon their original natural beliefs. Another person can identically use that to justify why they think they are or their parents are upon their natural beliefs. If, for example, you say, I feel certainty in my moral beliefs and no disgust, that proves I'm upon my original natural beliefs. Well, every Nazi, racist, Zionist, jihadi can say this exact same thing for their own beliefs. They too feel certain and not disturbed by their own moral beliefs. There are three main ways, or maybe just three, the only three ways, in determining what one's natural original beliefs are. Proven divine rationalistic revelation from Allah, that being God testifies himself to what he originally planted of natural beliefs in us. This is absolutely true in all cases, no exceptions. 2. Looking at what the vast majority of children believe, as whatever they believe initially tends to be a naturally arising belief. They tend to have a period in which they are not entirely conforming to their parents' belief, and these are usually the initial natural beliefs that come first due to how their psychology is, meaning their mind naturally produces these beliefs due to the structure of the psychology or the structure of their mind. It just naturally produces like how your lungs and throat and mouth naturally just by instinct breathe. Like you don't need to be taught it, you just do it. Naturally some beliefs just come up without anybody needing to even really teach you anything. Your brain is just designed to produce those beliefs initially. These natural beliefs can of course be at times unreliable or overridden, such as the natural belief to treat everything your parents say as the truth, since nowadays such a belief leads to irreconcilable contradiction that is no longer reliable to depend on in order to know moral truths, unlike the first generations. Looking at what the vast, so this is number three method. Looking at what the vast majority of mankind believes, this is a general proof, with exceptions, as the vast majority can at times be upon a false belief, like how most people nowadays commit shirk, or give the right of God to other than Him, whether atheists in how they attribute the causation of all events not to God, but to the inner workings of created things themselves, such that they function without relying upon God, or pagans who worship other than God. And there are many variations of each. The essay is getting too long, but here's how I would argue in summary now. The vast majority of mankind found homosexual relationships as immoral, just as the vast majority of mankind found incest, bestiality, necrophilia, plant-human sexual relationships as immoral. And it wasn't because of harm, but because those very acts are simply wrong due to what they are. Homosexual sex is wrong because it is homosexual. Incest type of relationships are wrong because they're incestual. Bestial relationships are wrong because they're bestial. Necrophiliac relationships are wrong because they're necrophilia. It does not need harm to make it wrong. Most liberals will agree with me on the other examples except for homosexuality, and this contradicts their principles. For they should either accept all these things as moral under particular situations, or they should reject the rule which justifies all others, sacrificing their false beliefs about morality for the truth. What will they try doing instead? What they will try to do is now argue that each of these other things are wrong for harm, are wrong due to harm. This is not hard to refute using their own principles, but they are lying to themselves if they really think that the only reason they think necrophilia is wrong is because of harm. But let's do a refutation cleanly of each. They will argue that the reason incestual relationships are wrong, even if both parties consent and waive protection and do not harm the other or impregnate the other, is because one party has more power/influence over the other given the difference in age. Like an older brother has more influence over the younger given the difference in age, and therefore the lack of equality of power makes this relationship wrong. This argument doesn't work for several reasons. Firstly, age or oldness does not always make one have more influence or power over another. Rather, other factors like intelligence, money, status, physical ability, intimidation tactics can all instead give one greater influence over the other whilst that person is younger in age. Second, this is an abnormal belief about morality, given that the vast majority of mankind does not see an inequality in power within a relationship as a bad thing, including liberals, I should add. Teachers have more influence over students than students over teachers. Parents have greater power and influence over their children than children do over them. Bosses have more power and influence over employees and the reverse. None of this is immoral, and all mankind has agreed upon this point. But let's take an even better example. If a liberal really sees that incest should be regarded as illegal and immoral because of an inequality in power and influence, then this entails that an older homosexual guy getting with a younger homosexual guy becomes immoral because his age will make him have greater influence over the younger person as he has more knowledge and life experience. Or what about a family that follows traditional gender roles, and so the male has more influence and power in the marriage over his wife because of him being male? Or what about a person who's richer than his partner, or more popular, or more intelligent, or physically stronger? All of these things result in an inequality of power and influence in the relationship. Well, now the liberal regard all this as immoral relationships deserving being banned. This leads to an absurdity where a liberal will only see a relationship as moral when both parties have identical amounts of money in every moment, are identical in age, born at the exact same time, identical in intelligence, identical in popularity, and so on. Identical in psychology, and literally all relationships will be seen as immoral without exception because everyone differs from their spouse in such a manner that one can identify that difference as a potential indication of a difference in power or influence, such as gender, size, money, resilience, laws favoring one gender, popularity, knowledge, etc. All of these can tip the scales of power and influence towards one individual over the other. Similarly with necrophilia, if a man or woman, before they die, consent in their will that they are fine with their dead corpse being used sexually, then how can they? Then now if someone comes after and digs the corpse and wears protection uses sexually, a liberal cannot rely upon any of its principles to say this is wrong because the parties involved consented and no harm occurred. Similarly with bestiality, if animals gave clear signs of consent, or if we could translate animal speech and they said we consent, and one wears protection, then again the entire thing becomes not immoral for liberals because no harm occurred. Protection was worn and there was consent. These obviously are wrongful conclusions. Consent and a lack of harm does not make any of these good. This directly brings to question the core rule liberals rely on to justify pretty much their entire moral system, that for so long as one consents and causes no harm, they can do whatever. This is a fabricated, imaginary, mythological claim about morality that has no proof. Yeah, that's it.